Welcome to Champion Stories. If this is your first time here, subscribe now and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. And now, on to today's story. The morning sun cast long shadows across the prestigious International Academy of Manila as luxury cars pulled up to drop off students dressed in crisp uniforms. Among them, a simple black sedan arrived quietly at the school gates. Princess Pacquiao stepped out, adjusting her backpack with the same determination that had made her father a legend in the boxing ring. At 13 years old, she possessed the quiet strength that ran through the Pacquiao bloodline. Though few at this elite institution knew of her famous heritage, Princess had specifically requested to attend school under her mother Jinky's maiden name, wanting to earn respect through her own merit rather than her father's reputation. Manny Pacquiao had reluctantly agreed, understanding his daughter's desire for normalcy. Though his protective instincts never truly rested when it came to his children, the academy prided itself on educating the children of Manila's wealthiest families. Teodoro Villanueva, the mathematics teacher, had built his reputation on maintaining the highest academic standards. His classroom walls displayed certificates and awards, testament to his 20-year career molding the minds of the privileged elite. However, beneath his professional exterior lay a man who had grown comfortable with the power that came from his position, particularly when dealing with students he perceived as beneath the school's social hierarchy. Princess entered the mathematics classroom that Tuesday morning, her homework neatly completed, despite staying up late to help her younger brother Israel with his own studies. She had always been diligent about her education, knowing how much her parents valued learning. Manny often told his children that education was the one treasure no one could ever take away from them, a lesson born from his own struggles growing up in the impoverished streets of General Santos City. The lesson began routinely enough, with Villanueva reviewing algebraic equations on the whiteboard. His teaching style was methodical, demanding absolute attention from every student. When he called upon Princess to solve a complex problem, she approached the board with quiet confidence. Her solution was correct, methodically worked through each step with precision that impressed even her classmates. However, Villanueva scrutinized her work with unusual intensity. Despite the accuracy of her calculations, he began questioning her methods with a tone that grew increasingly condescending. His criticism went beyond academic correction, evolving into something far more personal and cutting. The other students, predominantly from Manila's upper class, watched in uncomfortable silence as their teacher's comments took on an unmistakably prejudicial edge. Villanueva's words began targeting Princess's background, making assumptions about her family's financial status based on her simple appearance and reserved demeanor. He questioned whether someone from her apparent social class truly belonged at such a prestigious institution. His comments grew more pointed, suggesting that perhaps she had only gained admission through some form of charity program or special consideration. Princess stood at the front of the classroom, her cheeks burning with humiliation, while maintaining the dignified composure her parents had instilled in her. Her classmates shifted uncomfortably in their seats, witnessing what was clearly an abuse of authority. Some wanted to speak up, but the power dynamic between student and teacher created an atmosphere of intimidation that silenced even the most confident among them. The mathematical equations on the board seemed to blur as Princess fought back tears of frustration and embarrassment. She had never experienced such blatant discrimination, having been raised in an environment where her father's success had largely shielded the family from such prejudicial treatment. This was her first real encounter with the ugly reality that many Filipinos faced when confronting class-based discrimination. Villanueva continued his inappropriate commentary, seemingly emboldened by the silence in the room. His words cut deeper than any physical blow Princess had ever witnessed in her father's boxing matches. The teacher appeared to relish the power he wielded over this quiet student who had somehow triggered his deeply embedded prejudices. The humiliation reached its peak when Villanueva made a particularly cruel remark about Princess's family, likely being unable to afford proper tutoring, suggesting this explained her supposedly inferior mathematical approach. The classroom fell into an even deeper silence, with several students now visibly uncomfortable with their teacher's behavior. Princess returned to her seat with as much dignity as she could muster, her hands trembling slightly as she placed her pencil down. The remainder of the class passed in a blur of shame and confusion. She had always been proud of her academic achievements, but now questioned everything about her place in this world of privilege and prestige. Unknown to Villanueva, this moment would soon reach the ears of someone who had spent his entire life fighting against exactly this kind of injustice. The school day ended with Princess walking slowly toward the family car, her usual bright demeanor replaced by a heavy silence that immediately caught the attention of their longtime driver, Manny. He had been with the Pacquiao family for over 8 years and had developed an almost paternal instinct for reading the moods of the children he transported daily. Something was clearly wrong with the young girl, who typically filled the car ride home with animated stories about her classes and friends. During the drive through Manila's bustling streets, Princess stared out the window at the familiar sights that usually brought her comfort. The jeepneys painted in vibrant colors, street vendors selling fresh mangoes, and children playing basketball on makeshift courts reminded her of simpler times, when her biggest worry was finishing her homework before dinner. Today, however, these scenes felt distant and foreign, as if she were viewing them through a thick glass barrier created by her humiliation. Manny glanced repeatedly in the rearview mirror, noting how Princess clutched her backpack tightly against her chest and avoided making eye contact. In all his years of service to the family, he had never seen any of the Pacquiao children look so defeated. The protective instincts that Manny had instilled in all those close to his family began stirring within the loyal driver. Though he respected the girl's apparent need for silence during the journey home, the Pacquiao residence in Forbes Park stood as a testament to Manny's incredible journey from poverty to prosperity. Yet it remained remarkably understated compared to other mansions in the exclusive neighborhood. Jinky had always insisted on maintaining a home that felt warm and welcoming rather than ostentatious, believing that their children should never forget their humble beginnings or take their blessings for granted. Princess entered the house and immediately headed toward her room, hoping to process the day's events in private. However, her younger brother Israel was waiting in the living room, eager to share his excitement about a science project he had completed. His enthusiasm faltered when he saw his sister's expression, recognizing the same look she had worn years earlier when neighborhood children had teased her about their family's past struggles. Jinky emerged from the kitchen, where she had been preparing Princess's favorite afternoon snack of fresh lumpia, and noticed the unusual tension in the air. As a mother who had navigated her own share of social challenges while supporting Manny's career, she possessed an intuitive understanding of when her children were struggling with issues beyond typical teenage concerns. Her maternal instincts immediately focused on Princess, sensing that something significant had occurred at school. The afternoon progressed, with Princess remaining unusually quiet during family time, picking at her food and offering only brief responses to her mother's gentle inquiries about her day. Jinky exchanged concerned glances with their household staff, all of whom had noticed the dramatic change in Princess's typically cheerful disposition. The girl who usually helped her younger siblings with homework and filled the house with laughter seemed to have retreated into herself. As evening approached, Princess finally retreated to her bedroom, closing the door softly behind her. She sat at her desk, staring at her mathematics homework with a mixture of dread and determination. The equations that had once represented exciting challenges now reminded her of Villanueva's cruel words and the humiliation she had endured in front of her classmates. Every number seemed to mock her, questioning whether she truly belonged in that prestigious classroom. Meanwhile, Manny was traveling back from a business meeting in Cebu, unaware that his daughter was experiencing one of the most difficult days of her young life. His phone remained silent, carrying no indication of the storm that was brewing within his own household. The champion who had faced the world's most formidable opponents in the boxing ring was about to confront a different kind of fight, one that would test his skills as a father, protecting his child's dignity and self-worth. Manny Pacquiao's private jet touched down at Ninoy Aquino International Airport as the sun began its descent over Manila Bay. The flight from Cebu had been productive, with successful negotiations for a new community center in General Santos City, but his thoughts were already shifting toward home and family. After years of balancing his various business ventures with his role as a devoted father, Manny had developed an internal clock that always prioritized his children's needs above all other commitments. The drive home through Manila's evening traffic gave him time to reflect on his upcoming schedule. Tomorrow would bring meetings with his foundation's board members, discussions about expanding their scholarship programs for underprivileged Filipino students. These initiatives held special meaning for Manny, who understood firsthand how education could transform lives and break cycles of poverty that had trapped generations of Filipino families. Bayani met him at the airport with updates about the family's day. Though the loyal driver hesitated when discussing Princess's unusual behavior during the ride home from school. His years of service had taught him to be observant but discreet, understanding that family matters required delicate handling. However, his genuine concern for Princess's well-being compelled him to mention that something seemed to be troubling the young girl, though he couldn't identify the specific cause. Upon arriving home, Manny immediately sensed the subtle shift in the household's atmosphere. Jinky greeted him with her usual warmth, but he detected an underlying tension in her embrace that spoke of maternal worry. Their younger children, Jimuel, Michael, and Israel, gathered around him with their typical enthusiasm, sharing stories about their school activities and weekend plans. However, Princess's absence from this family ritual struck him as unusual and concerning. Jinky quietly informed him about Princess's uncharacteristic behavior throughout the afternoon and evening. She described how their daughter had barely touched her favorite foods, avoided family conversations, and retreated to her room much earlier than normal. As a mother who prided herself on maintaining open communication with all their children, Jinky felt frustrated by her inability to understand what had caused such a dramatic change in Princess's demeanor. Manny climbed the stairs toward Princess's bedroom, his footsteps careful and measured. Through years of fatherhood, he had learned that approaching troubled children required the same strategic thinking he had once applied in the boxing ring. Patience, observation, and timing were crucial elements in understanding what his children needed from him during difficult moments. He paused outside Princess's door, hearing the soft sounds of movement within, but no indication of the usual activities that typically occupied her evening hours. No music played from her speakers, no phone conversations with friends could be heard, and no rustling of textbook pages suggested she was working on homework. The silence felt heavy and unnatural, confirming his growing suspicion that something significant had occurred during her school day. Princess sat at her desk, staring at a blank piece of paper where she had intended to write about her day in the journal her mother had given her for her birthday. The words refused to come, trapped behind a wall of shame and confusion that she couldn't quite articulate. How could she explain to her parents that their success and fame had somehow made her a target for discrimination? How could she tell them that the very achievements they had worked so hard to provide for their family had become a source of humiliation in her daily life? The gentle knock on her door interrupted her troubled thoughts. She recognized her father's distinctive pattern of knocking, the same rhythm he had used since she was a small child. Part of her wanted to pretend she was asleep, to avoid the conversation she knew was coming. However, another part of her desperately needed the comfort and guidance that only her father could provide during moments when the world felt overwhelming and unfair. Princess opened her bedroom door to find her father standing in the hallway, his expression filled with the gentle concern that had comforted her through countless childhood difficulties. Manny's presence immediately brought a sense of safety that she had been desperately needing since the morning's humiliation. Without words, she stepped aside to allow him into her room, the same sanctuary where he had read her bedtime stories, helped with difficult homework assignments, and offered guidance during her most challenging moments. Manny settled into the chair beside her desk, his eyes taking in the untouched homework assignments and the blank journal page that spoke volumes about his daughter's emotional state. Years of reading opponents in the boxing ring had taught him to observe subtle details that others might miss. Princess's posture, the way she avoided direct eye contact, and the tension in her shoulders all indicated that she was carrying a burden too heavy for her young heart to bear alone. The silence between father and daughter stretched comfortably as Manny waited for Princess to find her voice. He had learned through experience that rushing his children to share their troubles often resulted in incomplete stories or surface-level explanations that missed the deeper issues at play. His patience had been cultivated through years of understanding that true communication required creating space for vulnerability and trust to emerge naturally. Princess finally began recounting the events of her mathematics class, her voice barely above a whisper, as she described Teodoro Villanueva's increasingly hostile behavior. Each detail she shared caused Manny's jaw to tighten almost imperceptibly, though he maintained his calm exterior to avoid adding his own anger to his daughter's distress. The story unfolded slowly, with Princess pausing frequently to gather courage for the more painful aspects of her experience. As she described the teacher's assumptions about their family's financial status and his suggestions that she didn't belong at the prestigious academy, Manny felt a familiar fire building in his chest. This was the same righteous anger that had fueled his determination to escape poverty and prove wrong those who had underestimated him throughout his career. However, this situation required a different kind of strategy than any boxing match he had ever faced. Princess's voice broke slightly as she recounted the most humiliating moments of Villanueva's verbal assault, particularly his comments about her family's supposed inability to afford proper tutoring. Manny's hands clenched involuntarily as he imagined his daughter standing alone at the front of that classroom, enduring prejudice and discrimination that no child should ever experience. The protective instincts that had driven him to provide the best possible life for his children now demanded action against this injustice. The conversation revealed layers of complexity that Manny hadn't anticipated. Princess expressed confusion about her identity within the school's social hierarchy, questioning whether her desire to succeed on her own merit had somehow backfired. She wondered aloud whether hiding her family's identity had been a mistake, though she still believed in the principle of earning respect through personal achievement rather than inherited status. Manny recognized in his daughter's struggle the same challenges he had faced throughout his career, when critics questioned his abilities based on his background rather than his demonstrated skills. The parallel between Princess's classroom humiliation and his own experiences with prejudice in the boxing world created a deep emotional connection that transcended the typical parent-child relationship. They were both fighters facing discrimination, though her battlefield was an academic institution rather than a boxing ring. As Princess finished her account, exhaustion settled over her features like a heavy blanket. The emotional toll of reliving the day's events, combined with the relief of finally sharing her burden, left her feeling drained, but somehow lighter. She looked at her father with eyes that held both hope and uncertainty, waiting to see how he would respond to this violation of her dignity and self-worth. Manny spent the remainder of the evening processing his daughter's account while maintaining his composure for the sake of his family. After ensuring Princess felt heard and supported, he retreated to his home office, where the walls displayed championship belts and photographs documenting his journey from the streets of General Santos City to international stardom. These reminders of his own struggles with prejudice and discrimination provided context for the careful planning that would be required to address his daughter's situation appropriately. The night passed slowly as Manny researched the International Academy of Manila's policies, faculty information, and administrative structure. His approach to this challenge would mirror the meticulous preparation he had once applied to studying opponents before major fights. Every detail mattered when confronting institutional prejudice, and he understood that emotional reactions without strategic thinking rarely produced lasting change or justice. Teodoro Villanueva's professional background revealed a pattern of behavior that concerned Manny deeply. Online reviews from former students and parents contained subtle hints about the teacher's attitudes towards students from different socioeconomic backgrounds. While nothing explicitly documented discriminatory behavior, the coded language in several complaints suggested that Princess's experience might not have been an isolated incident. Dawn broke over Manila as Manny finalized his plan of action. His strategy would involve multiple phases, beginning with a formal meeting with school administrators to document the incident and ensure appropriate consequences for Villanueva's behavior. However, he also recognized that lasting change required addressing the systemic issues that allowed such discrimination to flourish within educational institutions that claimed to value diversity and inclusion. The morning routine proceeded normally for the Pacquiao household, though Princess moved through her preparations with obvious reluctance. Her usual enthusiasm for learning had been replaced by anxiety about returning to an environment where she had been made to feel unwelcome and inferior. Manny observed his daughter's struggle while maintaining his own calm demeanor, knowing that his reaction would significantly influence her ability to recover from this traumatic experience. Jinky had been briefed on the situation and coordinated with Manny to ensure Princess felt supported without being overwhelmed by parental intervention. Their approach balanced protective instincts with respect for their daughter's growing independence and desire to handle challenges with dignity. The delicate balance between advocacy and empowerment required careful navigation to avoid undermining Princess's confidence in her own abilities. Bayani received specific instructions about the day's transportation arrangements, though the details remained confidential to protect the family's privacy during this sensitive situation. The loyal driver's concern for Princess's well-being had not gone unnoticed, and his observations from the previous day had provided valuable insights into the timing and severity of the incident that had affected the young girl so profoundly. At precisely 9 o'clock in the morning, Manny placed a call to Dr. Esperanza Mendoza, the principal of the International Academy of Manila. His tone remained professional and measured as he requested an immediate meeting to discuss a serious incident involving his daughter and a faculty member. The principal's surprise at learning Princess's true identity was evident, though she quickly agreed to accommodate his request for a same-day conference. The school's administrative offices buzzed with unusual activity as word spread about the unexpected visit from one of the Philippines' most respected public figures, Dr. Mendoza spent the morning reviewing Princess's academic records and Villanueva's employment file, preparing for what she anticipated would be a challenging conversation about institutional accountability and student welfare. Meanwhile, Villanueva began his day unaware that his actions had set in motion a series of events that would fundamentally change his career and force the entire school community to confront uncomfortable truths about privilege, prejudice, and the responsibility of educators to protect all students regardless of their backgrounds. The International Academy of Manila's administrative building had never hosted a visitor quite like Manny Pacquiao. As his modest sedan pulled through the school gates at exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon, curious students and faculty members gathered at windows to catch a glimpse of the legendary boxer, whose presence had transformed an ordinary Tuesday into an extraordinary event. However, Manny's expression remained serious and focused, reflecting the gravity of the situation that had brought him to his daughter's school. Dr. Esperanza Mendoza waited in her office, having spent the morning reviewing every detail of Princess's enrollment and academic performance. The records painted a picture of an exemplary student who had consistently demonstrated both intellectual capability and respectful behavior throughout her time at the academy. This information made Villanueva's treatment of the girl even more inexplicable and professionally inappropriate. Manny entered the principal's office with the same quiet confidence that had characterized his approach to championship fights. His demeanor remained respectful but unmistakably determined, conveying the message that he expected serious attention to be paid to his concerns. Years of navigating complex negotiations in the boxing world had taught him the importance of maintaining dignity while firmly establishing the stakes of any important conversation. The meeting began with Dr. Mendoza expressing her shock at learning about Princess's true identity and her regret that any student had experienced discrimination within their institution. However, Manny's focus remained fixed on the specific actions that needed to be taken to address Villanueva's behavior and prevent similar incidents from affecting other students in the future. His approach emphasized accountability rather than apologies, understanding that meaningful change required concrete consequences. As Manny recounted his daughter's experience in detail, Dr. Mendoza's expression grew increasingly grave. The systematic nature of Villanueva's prejudicial comments revealed a pattern of behavior that violated multiple school policies regarding student dignity, inclusive education, and professional conduct. The principal realized that this incident represented a significant failure of institutional oversight that demanded immediate and comprehensive response. The conversation expanded beyond Princess's individual case to address broader concerns about the school's culture and commitment to treating all students with equal respect, regardless of their backgrounds. Manny's questions about faculty training, diversity policies, and complaint procedures revealed gaps in the academy's systems that had allowed discriminatory behavior to flourish unchecked. His business experience had taught him to identify systemic weaknesses that enabled individual misconduct. Dr. Mendoza found herself confronting uncomfortable truths about the elite institution she had led for over a decade. The Academy's reputation for academic excellence had overshadowed the need for vigilant attention to issues of equity and inclusion. Manny's presence forced her to acknowledge that prestigious credentials and wealthy clientele did not automatically create an environment where all students could thrive without fear of prejudice or discrimination. Meanwhile, word of Manny's visit had spread throughout the school community, creating an atmosphere of tension and speculation. Villanueva remained unaware of the storm gathering around his actions, continuing his afternoon classes with the same arrogant demeanor that had characterized his treatment of Princess. His colleagues began to whisper among themselves, sensing that something significant was occurring in the administrative offices. The meeting in Dr. Mendoza's office stretched into its second hour as Manny outlined his expectations for addressing the immediate situation and implementing long-term reforms to prevent future incidents. His demands were reasonable but non-negotiable, reflecting his understanding that half measures would not adequately protect his daughter or other vulnerable students from similar treatment. The champion who had never backed down from a fight was not about to compromise when his child's dignity and educational experience were at stake. As the afternoon progressed, the entire school community remained unaware that their institution was about to undergo a transformation that would redefine their understanding of respect, accountability, and the true meaning of educational excellence. The school's public address system crackled to life at exactly 3:15 in the afternoon, interrupting classes throughout the International Academy of Manila. Dr. Mendoza's voice carried an unusual gravity as she announced an immediate all-school assembly in the main auditorium. Students exchanged puzzled glances, while teachers hurried to organize orderly transitions from their classrooms. Sensing that something unprecedented was about to unfold within their prestigious institution, Villanueva gathered his mathematics materials with mild irritation at the disruption to his carefully planned lesson schedule. His afternoon classes had proceeded normally, with no indication that his treatment of Princess the previous day had generated any consequences. The arrogant confidence that had characterized his behavior for years remained intact as he joined his colleagues in shepherding students toward the auditorium for what he assumed would be a routine administrative announcement. The auditorium filled quickly with nearly 800 students and faculty members, their conversations creating a buzz of speculation about the unexpected gathering. Princess sat among her classmates, her stomach churning with anxiety as she wondered whether her father's visit to the school had somehow triggered this unusual assembly. She had hoped that any resolution to her situation could be handled privately, without drawing attention to her family's involvement. Dr. Mendoza took the stage with an expression that immediately silenced the assembled crowd. Her usual warm demeanor had been replaced by a seriousness that commanded absolute attention from every person in the auditorium. Behind her stood several members of the school's board of directors, their presence indicating that whatever announcement was coming carried significant institutional weight and authority. The principal began by addressing the Academy's mission statement and core values, emphasizing the institution's commitment to creating an environment where every student could pursue academic excellence without fear of discrimination or prejudice. Her words carried particular weight as she outlined specific policies regarding respectful treatment of all community members regardless of their backgrounds, socioeconomic status, or family circumstances. As Dr. Mendoza continued her remarks, Villanueva began to feel an uncomfortable stirring of recognition. The principal's emphasis on recent incidents of inappropriate faculty behavior and the need for immediate corrective action seemed to be building toward something that directly concerned him. His colleagues seated nearby noticed his increasingly tense posture and the way his hands gripped the armrests of his chair. The moment of revelation arrived when Dr. Mendoza announced that effective immediately, Teodoro Villanueva was being suspended, pending a full investigation into allegations of discriminatory conduct toward a student. The auditorium fell into stunned silence as the gravity of the announcement settled over the assembled community. Faculty members turned to look at Villanueva, whose face had drained of color as he realized the magnitude of the consequences facing him. Princess felt a mixture of vindication and overwhelming emotion as she watched her teacher's public humiliation unfold before the entire school community. The man who had made her feel small and unwelcome was now experiencing his own moment of shame and professional disgrace. However, rather than satisfaction, She found herself feeling a complex blend of justice and sympathy for someone whose career was crumbling before hundreds of witnesses. Dr. Mendoza continued by announcing comprehensive reforms to the Academy's policies and procedures, including mandatory diversity training for all faculty members, the establishment of a student advocacy office, and the implementation of anonymous reporting systems for incidents of discrimination or harassment. These changes represented a fundamental shift in the institution's approach to creating an inclusive educational environment. The Assembly concluded with Dr. Mendoza's commitment to ensuring that every student at the International Academy of Manila would be treated with dignity and respect regardless of their background. As students and faculty filed out of the auditorium in subdued silence, the entire school community understood that they had witnessed a pivotal moment that would reshape their institution's culture and values for years to come. 3 months after the assembly that transformed the International Academy of Manila, Princess walked through the school corridors with renewed confidence and purpose. The changes implemented following her father's intervention had created a dramatically different atmosphere throughout the institution. Students from diverse backgrounds now felt genuinely welcomed and valued, while faculty members approached their teaching responsibilities with heightened awareness of their impact on every child's educational experience and self-worth. The anonymous reporting system had revealed that Princess's experience with Villanueva had not been isolated. Several other students came forward with their own accounts of discriminatory treatment, confirming Manny's suspicion that systemic changes were necessary to address deep-rooted problems within the school's culture. These revelations validated his decision to pursue comprehensive reforms, rather than simply seeking individual accountability for one teacher's misconduct. Villanueva's investigation had concluded with his termination from the academy, though the process had also provided him with opportunities for reflection and professional development. The former teacher enrolled in diversity training programs and began working with community organizations focused on educational equity. His journey toward understanding the harm he had caused became part of his path toward redemption and personal growth. Princess's mathematics class now flourished under the guidance of Isadora Santos, a young educator whose passion for inclusive teaching created an environment where every student felt encouraged to participate and excel. The new teacher's approach emphasized collaborative learning and celebrated diverse problem-solving methods, transforming the classroom from a place of fear into a space of intellectual exploration and mutual respect. The scholarship program that Manny had proposed during his meeting with Dr. Mendoza had become a cornerstone of the Academy's new commitment to diversity and inclusion. Students from various socio-economic backgrounds now attended the prestigious institution, bringing fresh perspectives and experiences that enriched the educational environment for everyone. Princess took particular pride in mentoring some of these scholarship recipients, sharing her own experiences and offering guidance. Dr. Mendoza had embraced her role as a leader in educational reform, speaking at conferences throughout Southeast Asia about the importance of creating truly inclusive academic institutions. The International Academy of Manila became a model for other elite schools, seeking to balance academic excellence with social responsibility and equitable treatment of all students, regardless of their backgrounds. The Pacquiao family's approach to the situation had demonstrated the power of addressing injustice through constructive action, rather than destructive retaliation. Manny's measured response had achieved meaningful change while preserving his daughter's dignity and creating lasting benefits for countless other students. His handling of the crisis reflected the same strategic thinking and principled determination that had characterized his boxing career. Princess's academic performance continued to excel, but more importantly, her confidence and sense of belonging within the school community had been fully restored. She no longer felt the need to hide her family's identity, instead embracing her heritage while continuing to earn respect through her own achievements and character. The experience had taught her valuable lessons about standing up against injustice and the importance of using privilege responsibly. The transformation of the International Academy of Manila served as a powerful reminder that meaningful change often emerges from moments of crisis and conflict. What began as one student's humiliation had evolved into an opportunity for institutional growth and renewed commitment to the values that should define quality education. The school's reputation now rested not only on academic achievement, but also on its dedication to treating every student with dignity and respect. As Princess prepared for her final year at the academy, she carried with her the knowledge that her voice mattered and that standing up for justice could create positive change that extended far beyond individual circumstances. The champion's daughter had learned that true victory sometimes required fighting battles that extended beyond personal vindication to encompass broader principles of fairness and human dignity. Thank you for watching another episode of Champion Stories. If you enjoyed today's story, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming inspiring tales about Manny Pacquiao. Share your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one, and many times your ideas inspire our next episode. See you next time.